so Panasonic Lumix, released some very interesting cameras, especially for filmmaking. These ones are the S1H, the S5II X and also GH7. In this video I will take a look whether the S1H, the S5II X or the GH7 are best suited for you as a filmmaker. Coming up. Hi guys, my name is Paul. I'm a German-based cinematographer and this channel is all about filmmaking gear reviews but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribe. That really helps the channel. Thank you. So let's talk about the body real quick. So overall, these cameras feel basically the same despite size and weight differences. But I think the GH7 and also the S1H have a distinct advantage over the S5 or S5II X, namely because how they can articulate and flip out the screen. So for example, if I'm doing just like this, then I can obviously articulate my screen without obstructing my ins and outs, which is really helpful if I want to connect a microphone or even via HDMI an external monitor and something like that. Another big feature is that they have internal timecode and they also have a timecode connector to jam external timecode, which is really helpful if you want to do multicam shooting or any kind of proper audio production. So since we are talking already about audio, the GH7 definitely takes the cake here. Since you can with the Lumix XLR adapter internally record 32-bit float, which is pretty insane actually. Even though, as I've said in my GH7 review, I'm not fully convinced by the price and the build quality of the XLR adapter from Lumix, because I think out there are other cheaper options that basically do the same. But the option that you can record that internally in camera is pretty good and also gives you a real advantage over the S1H and also over the S5II X if audio is a big concern for you. So a lot of people, including myself, are wishing for 4K 60 uncropped and full frame on the S1H or also S5II X. Well, that's where the GH7 comes into place, especially when it comes to frame rates. This camera is actually pretty insane. We can do 5.7K in up to 60 frames without any crop. We can do in 4K in up to 120 frames without any crop. And we can even record in good old Full HD in up to 300 frames without any crop. Now it's important to say that the camera has a smaller sensor from the start. So take this into account, but you can use, as I have here, a speed booster to get a Super 35 look, and especially for that, with all the frame rate options, the GH7 is pretty good when it comes to that, and also is the best when you want to do a lot of things in slow motion, I would say. So in the sense of low light, the cameras with the bigger sensors, such as the S1H and the S5II X, does have an advantage over the GH7 due to the bigger sensor. So especially the S1H is the best camera I've used so far in low light. I could go up to ISO 25600 without any issues, and the S5II X is not far behind. I would rate it to ISO 12800, something like that. So the ISO performance of these cameras is really great. For the GH7, I wouldn't go beyond 3200. So over the years, I learned to love Panasonic really, because the image quality out of this camera is just really gorgeous. They look really detailed without looking too overly sharp and overly digital. And one point that I also like is the color rendition of all of these cameras. It looks very pleasing and very neutral and makes the life very easy if you do color grading and stuff like that. So therefore, all in all, the image quality out of all of these three cameras is just absolutely amazing. However, there's one thing that I prefer over the S1H and GH7. So when they come straight out of camera, and especially the colors, they look more neutral and a little bit more natural, I would say. On the S5II X or S5II, they come out a little bit more vibrant, which is something that I personally don't like too much. But obviously all of that can be easily corrected in post. So therefore, it's just a personal preference, I would say. Let's quickly talk about autofocus, and especially in this case, the S1H has a clear disadvantage because this autofocus is, especially in video, not useful at all. It's useless basically. But the GH7 and also the S5 II and S5 IIX have a very good autofocus, also in tracking and subject detection and all that kinds of stuff. So this works really well. So if autofocus is your concern, then these camera models are better suited for you. Dynamic range is obviously really important for filmmakers, and especially when it comes to that, the S1H is really stellar. I got 7.5 stops of exposure latitude from this camera, which puts it on par with cameras like the C70 or even Red Komodo. So the dynamic range of this camera is just insanely good. The S5 II and S5 IIX are not too far behind. They are maybe quarter or even half a stop less, but overall, just by eye, I think you can't tell the difference basically. But the GH7 has here a little shortcoming due to its smaller sensor, but on the other hand, for its smaller sensor, it has a really good dynamic range because it has more dynamic range, stop more than the Pocket 4K. So I was able to get out 6.5 stops of exposure latitude, which is for this small sensor really impressive. However, on all of these cameras, the dynamic range is really good. So dynamic range wouldn't be a problem whenever you use one of these cameras, honestly. Also talking about the codecs internally, also the GH7 takes the cake here because it gives you the most flexibility. You can record either a normal MP4 or MOV files, which are pretty good, also all eye and intercompression, but you can also record internally ProRes in basically most resolutions that you want to, and you can also record in ProRes RAW, which is pretty insane. The S5 IIX is not far behind. You can record ProRes, but you cannot record RAW internally, and on the S1H all these options of ProRes are just missing, so you can just do normal all intro recordings, which is also basically fine, but since the GH7 has the most flexibility here, I think this camera has the best options when it comes to codecs. So also ergonomics is a pretty important factor. So you see like that these three cameras differ in size and weight. Personally, I like bigger cameras, but obviously this is a very subjective topic. But what I want to say is I like that this camera is a little bit bigger. I have more buttons that I can customize. The grip is a little bit bigger, and I have different wheels for something. And I also have this info screen on top right here, which always shows me my settings, and I also can customize it. And all these buttons are illuminated, which is a pretty nice feature on the S1H. But all in all, as I've said, this is really subjective. So if you prefer a smaller camera, then obviously that one is better for you. So in scores, the GH7 actually wins, but there's always more to a camera than just scores. So it also really depends if you prefer full frame over micro four thirds. That's also a big discussion that I don't want to put out here. And it obviously also depends on your shooting scenarios and what you actually prefer. For example, for me, dynamic range, image quality, and also time code and ergonomics are most important. Therefore, the S1H is the best camera for myself, but that might be totally different for you. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and if you have any further questions, then just drop them down in the comments below, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Cheers! So since we are already talking about audio, the GH7, well, that was unplanned. Kommt in die Outtakes. Hallo! Hallo du! Okay.